welcome to Pulp Reality number 2. I am privileged to be included in this second issue of this great magazine. Thank you, Charles. And he has requested that I give you, the viewer and reader, an opportunity to get inside my head. Make sure you're wearing a hazmat suit because we're going to learn how a story is constructed, particularly when you're working with somebody else's character and they are still around to bawl you out if you do it wrong. Anyway, the genesis of this story actually begins around 2016 when I received the rights to do one of my best selling books. This one here, The Original Skyman Meets the Master of Steam. This is based on an old Columbia comic book character that I got the rights to write this story. But the thing is, everyone who worked on the original run of stories back in the 1940s is no longer with us. So I studied the original comics in order to learn what Skyman could do, what he couldn't do, the types of adventures he had, what that little gun in his hand does, and why he's so keen on this airship here, and how fast it can go. And then later on, I wrote the adventures of Conrad von Honig for this anthology, Quest for the Space Gods by Flinch Books. Jim Beard and John C. Bruning, who created Conrad, put out a Bible of his adventures and gave us a sample story of what kind of tone the stories should have. I had the advantage of being able to email either of these guys and say, hey, listen, would your character do this? Where was he during this time? That's one thing. When you get somebody else's character, it's incumbent upon you to leave the character no better, no worse than when you got him. And in this case with Charles, my goal was to not only give him a decent story featuring his amazing character, Captain Hawkland, but to leave him maybe a few characters that he could play with down the road in his own adventures. So I started to construct the basic timeline for him. Now, Doc Saga is what I call an ageless adventurer. He's approximately, by the time of this story, around 250 years old. He started out as an army healer, and one day he's set upon by various villains and is brought back to health. And from that time on, he goes around the world exchanging healing techniques with shamans, magicians, regular physicians, anyone who knows how to bring a person back from the edge of death. In time, Doc learns things that are not of this world, and thus he no longer ages. And in fact, he has certain powers that are starting to manifest by about the time we see him in this story. Now, Charles has established that Captain Hawkland, his adventures take place from like around World War I to the start of World War II. So I wanted to set something that was pretty far removed from a lot of the books that Charles has written. And being somewhat of a history nut, I started running up and down this timeline of Hawkland's and realized there's not a whole lot about him in World War One. So I came up with a basic story. And it usually starts with a hook for me. And in this case, it was Were-Panthers. I wanted to do something supernatural, something Captain Hawkland maybe didn't do a whole lot of, but my character Doc Saga is firmly in the supernatural camp, so to speak. Well, in researching, I thought I would do something in approximately 1917. And the idea came to me that how could you weaponize a form of lycanthropy, where one turns into one type of animal from being a human and back again. And so I developed this kind of mythology for what I called a bastanthrope. I can barely say it. I've only seen it in print. I'll practice later when I start selling this book at shows. But the idea, and I took that name from the Egyptian god Bast, who was the god of cats and other things. A lot of gods did multitasking back in the day, as you see in my book Volcana, Rebirth of the Champion, #always promote. Anyway, And so I came up with this idea of how could you weaponize basically a curse. And so I came up with an idea, and once having done that, once I figured out a way that somebody could infect somebody with this virus and then send him towards the enemy, kind of like a Typhoid Mary kind of thing, except the two alternatives would be either dead bodies or more like him. So I started coming up with a basic plot, which I call the elevator pitch, where you boil everything down to a couple sentences. Captain Hawkland and Doc Saga unite. They find a man who can turn into a werepanther. And I came up with the idea that Hawkland gets infected, and he must make sure that this curse ends with him. So now comes the process of plotting the story, and I then came on the ending I wanted to have, and so like Mickey Spillane used to do, I kind of plot backwards at this point, and I use a framework that I've used for a long time, created by Doc Savage creator Lester Dent, that tells you where to put in surprises, plot twists, etc. And then once I had my story, the basic bones of the story, then I start populating it with other characters. And one hit me that you will not learn his identity until the very end of the book. In fact, the absolute end of the book, which is another place where I got inspired by Mickey Spillane from one of his books. So now I've got my plot, and I've got the basic idea. The next thing is I'm asking Charles. Again, I had the advantage of direct contact with the creator. How awesome is that? And I had several questions like, where was Hawkland? Was he even a captain at this time? Turns out he was a lieutenant. So we used that. So how do I get my character, Doc Saga, an American ageless adventurer, into the trenches of World War One, inside the heart of the conflict? Then how do I get the two of them together? Then how do I get them out of there? It's a lot of these little fine points that you have to think about as you set up this story. Now, I do mine from a general plot. I generally don't pants the thing. I don't trust myself to find a suitable ending before I'm done. I've written myself into too many corners that way. So anyway, I've got my story. I find out I'm working with Lieutenant Hawkland. Now, the thing is, you have to go keep in mind that you're working with somebody else's character. You don't want to diminish their effectiveness. You want to make them vital to the process of the story. So in this one, Captain Hawkland is the only one who can bring Doc Saga back home. He's got to get him there because he's an experienced pilot, and he's got to bring him back home. Now, Hawkland, I will admit, I probably don't give him as much to do as I should, but I have the luxury of maybe one day making nice with Charles, and maybe I can expand this story or do a sequel. But because of a lot of the supernatural elements, Doc Saga has to take most of the lead in there, unfortunately, for Hawkland. But then you come up with a story, and then I came up with a way that Hawkland shows his true heroism towards the end and his strength of will. Again, no spoilers. And if anything, he becomes what we call the everyman. Kind of like if you watch Doctor Who. That's why he has his companions. That's why Robin is there beside Batman. There is always someone there who, in the presence of a big hero, who asks the questions that you and I need to ask in order to understand and enjoy the story. So after plotting back and forth, and knowing my word count, which I only violated by a couple of hundred words, for me that's pretty darn good. I'm proud of myself. Yay, Brian. So then comes the process of writing and then editing, re-editing, and until it is as good as I feel I can make it. And then I send it to Charles. Again, I've been, asking him questions back and forth. Would this character behave this way? Can you give me a physical description? Who does Hawkland report to at this time? Fill in the names so that they fit in very tightly with his continuity. And having turned in this story, I would be ready to rewrite parts of it. I'd be even ready to have it rejected if Charles felt it didn't measure up to the high quality standard that he has put up for Pulp Reality, the magazine series. But obviously, I'm in. And Charles liked the story. I was very pleased with it, and I enjoyed so much working with the great Captain Hawkland and the great Charles F. Millhouse. Thank you, Charles, for this amazing opportunity. So that's a little glimpse into how I construct not just the story that you have read in Pulp Reality #2, but also generally informs my work as a whole. And that's how I do most of my writing, with the outline in mind and the careful plotting. Now, it's not to say that some things can't change during the course of the story. I actually wrote in more interaction with the messenger than was originally intended, and found other ways to create a distraction. It was quite different in the original draft, but as you're writing, you're still perking on these things, and new ideas come to you, and you kind of think them out, revise your outline, and then move forward from there. But anyway, it was a great experience. I hope you got something from this. And don't forget, I'm also in Pulp Reality #1. You can also check out my work at risingtide.pub, where Charles has a story in my first Doc Saga book that I am in the process of putting together. Anyway, thank you for enjoying Pulp Reality. When you're done, please leave us an honest review on Amazon if you would. It helps us very much. And as always, folks, thanks for listening, and keep 'em flying.